If your child is interested in chemistry and is doing experiments in the garage, you should definitely keep an eye on them. Because you can never really predict what a smart child might be capable of. After all, no one wants a nuclear reactor in their house.
David Hahn was a very intelligent child. He was born in Michigan in 1976. His parents divorced when he was still very young. Because of this, David became withdrawn and distant from the outside world. He was usually quiet in social environments. However, he had a mind that constantly tried to understand what he observed. Why are metals shiny and different in color? How do gases move through the air? These were the kinds of questions he asked. His grandfather must have noticed this curiosity because he gave David a book as a gift. In fact, everything started with that gift. The Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments. David's grandfather gave him this book to help him improve himself in chemistry. But this book was not as innocent as it seemed. The book included experiments such as producing toxic gases using household chemicals, synthesizing explosive materials, dangerous reactions involving metals, experiments with risky substances like mercury compounds, chlorine gas, and hydrogen cyanide. Shortly after its publication, the book was withdrawn. But one copy was already in David Hahn's hands. David, who was already interested in chemistry, began to develop himself even more in this field. After a while, theoretical knowledge was no longer enough for him. When he was just 10 years old, with his father's help, he set up a small chemistry lab in his room. In fact, it could hardly be called a laboratory. It consisted of unused glass cups from the house, a few metal containers, and a kitchen thermometer. As raw materials for his experiments, he used bleach, ammonia-based cleaning products, manganese dioxide taken from batteries, and rust removers containing phosphoric acid. Days passed, and David continued his experiments in his small laboratory. Each experiment led to the next one. Of course, there were failed experiments as well, but those were part of the process. During one of these failed experiments, he made too much noise. Because of this, his father warned him and made him move the laboratory to the basement. That noise might have been the first, but it would not be the last. As time went on, David improved, and his experiments became both more interesting and more dangerous. Moving the laboratory to the basement was actually good for him. It provided an isolated environment and a larger space to work in. He completed missing parts of his lab using his own resources. He even built an electrolysis device using radio parts and a few adapters he found. Only a few years had passed since he first set up his lab, but experiments like simple salt and acid reactions were now too basic for him. David's curiosity for chemistry never faded. Dangerous experiments and reactions began to attract his attention. One day while doing research, he came across a substance called nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin is highly reactive and explosive. It is used in dynamite production and rocket fuel. In short, it was very normal for this substance to catch David's interest. David decided to produce nitroglycerin. He used chemicals taken from batteries and several cleaning products with suitable ingredients. At first, everything seemed normal. However, the materials he used had low purity and contained incompatible compounds. As a result, the reaction progressed very fast and out of control. The mixture started to heat up rapidly, and David had no cooling system to stabilize it. The silence of the basement was broken by a small but sharp sound. After the explosion, David was not injured. He was still a child, but he was not frightened by the incident. Instead, he described it as a step closer to success. He had seen that explosive chemicals release sudden and intense energy. David continued to improve himself in chemistry. He read articles, studied more, and kept experimenting. With the money he saved, he bought proper laboratory equipment. He only conducted experiments when he was home alone because he did not want his family to know if something went wrong. He learned from his mistakes and carefully recorded every experiment in his notebook. From time to time, his stepmother argued with his father because of the noises and chemical smells coming from the experiments. His father warned David repeatedly, 2 years passed like this. When David was 14 years old, he conducted another nitroglycerin experiment. This time, he successfully produced it. This greatly increased his confidence. However, the chemical smells, sudden noises, and uncontrollable reactions in the house could no longer be ignored. Because of this, his father shut down the laboratory and banned David from doing experiments at home. David reacted as if to say, "If there's no lab, then I'm not staying." He moved in with his mother. David's mother was also against doing experiments inside the house, but she knew that David was talented in chemistry and did not want to discourage him. So they made an agreement. David was not a very social child and spent most of his time in his lab. His mother allowed him to continue his experiments under 2 conditions. He would regularly attend Boy Scouts of America activities, and he would do his experiments not inside the house, but in a small shed in the backyard used as storage. This way, David would not experiment inside the house, and through scouting activities, he would socialize and gain discipline. After this agreement, David moved his laboratory to the small shed at his mother's house. With this agreement, a new period began in David's life. He kept the promise he made to his mother and joined the Boy Scouts of America. In scouting, David learned discipline, survival skills, and basic engineering, and he combined these with his knowledge of chemistry and physics. However, what interested him the most was the atomic badge. Through the brochures given in scouting, David learned in detail about atomic energy, radiation, and isotope concepts. For a child with such a strong interest and knowledge in chemistry, it was inevitable that these topics would attract him. David's curiosity, which started with chemistry, was slowly turning into an interest in nuclear physics. Through scouting, he also learned that elements could be found in nature. Now he wanted to own every element in the periodic table. This was no longer a dream, but a goal, because if he had all the elements, he believed he would be free. He could perform any experiment he wanted, however he wanted. In fact, the world works a bit like this. A person without money wants money. A person who is not loved wants to be loved. In the same way, David had developed himself in chemistry despite having very little. Wanting to own all the elements was completely normal for him. Because of this idea, David began to improve his knowledge of nuclear reactions, isotope transformations, and chain reactions. As a result of this research, he realized that he needed a breeder reactor. Of course, no one was going to give him a breeder reactor. But David did not give up by saying, "This is too hard." As he researched and learned more, he slowly began to sketch his plan and project in his notebook. Over time, the project took shape, and David filled in the missing parts. He needed to obtain some radioactive materials. To do this, he was looking for a method to activate isotopes by bombarding them with neutrons. In order to affect atomic nuclei, he planned to build a reactor that could emit neutrons intensely, which he called a neutron gun. At that age, I was thinking about which basketball court I should play basketball on. Using university-level books, he understood how atomic nuclei could behave. On paper, everything seemed logical. The problem was that he was trying to do this in a small shed in his backyard. He read the technical brochures distributed during scouting activities over and over again. These brochures contained information about which institutions educational isotopes could be obtained from. David contacted the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission by acting like a high school teacher. He had several conversations with Sonald Erb from the Isotope Production and Distribution Department. Sonald Erb gave David information on how isotopes could be isolated, how chain reactions could be controlled, and what was required to build a reactor. After all, David had truly developed himself in chemistry. It was completely normal for Sonald Erb to think David was a chemistry teacher. David now had the necessary knowledge and a plan for how to build a breeder reactor. All he needed to do was gather the required materials. David needed elements such as americium, uranium, radium, lithium, and thorium. Don't be fooled by their cool names. These elements could be obtained from everyday items. Americium is found inside smoke detectors and helps detect smoke. Radium is found in old glow-in-the-dark watches. Lithium is found in batteries. Thorium was found in gas lantern mantles used in the 1960s. He knew how to find everything, but David did not have enough money. So he started working as a cashier at a fast food restaurant. With the money he earned, he first completed the necessary equipment for his laboratory. Then for raw materials, he bought broken smoke detectors. He collected old scrap watches. He bought batteries. He bought gas lanterns. Uranium, however, was not a mineral he could easily obtain. It was one of the purest forms of uranium and was used as fuel in nuclear reactors. In short, it was not something you could buy at a supermarket. No one would sell uranium to a 16, 17-year-old boy anyway. While researching, David came across a company that supplied materials for experiments. He contacted this company and introduced himself as a university professor from Czechoslovakia. He asked for a sample to examine, saying that if it met his expectations, he would place regular orders. In this way, he obtained uranium illegally. In the end, he managed to get a small piece of uranium. The reactor he was planning was not as large as those in nuclear facilities. In short, even this piece was enough for a start. In uranium ore, the U-235 and U-238 isotopes naturally exist. David tried to separate the uranium using acids and filters he prepared at home. However, this attempt failed, and he no longer had any uranium ore left. As an alternative, he decided to try thorium-232. He extracted thorium from gas lantern mantles through various chemical processes. He managed to do this with the limited means he had, almost with nothing. The methods he chose were extremely reckless and dangerous, but our crazy chemist did not care. He combined thorium with a few other elements and brought them together in a setup made of aluminum foil, several metal parts, and metal containers. His goal was to concentrate the radiation as much as possible, and he succeeded. Now he had an extremely dangerous and uncontrolled radioactive setup. Technically, it might not have been a reactor, but it was producing radiation and a serious amount of it. For the first time, this situation frightened David. He began taking radiation measurements at regular intervals. One night he noticed that the measurements were much higher than before. He had to make a decision. Late at night, he took the car and went out to drive around the city to think. It was past midnight. David, slowly driving through the streets, caught the attention of a police patrol doing routine checks. The police stopped David for a control. The police started to search the car as part of a routine check. David was already nervous because there were radioactive materials in the trunk, left over from his previous experiments. When it was time to open the trunk, David warned the police. He told them that there were dangerous and radioactive materials inside. This warning was not to save himself. He truly did not want anyone to get hurt. But after David said this, the situation stopped being a routine check. It had now become a federal case. The police secured the area and informed their superiors. In a short time, every vehicle with sirens arrived at the scene. Special teams took radiation measurements. David already knew the result, so he was not surprised. The radiation coming from the car was far above normal levels. After this was confirmed, David was taken into custody and brought to the police station. An investigation process began. Authorities asked David where he got these materials, what he used them for, and where he carried out his experiments. At first, David did not want to answer these questions. He did not think the FBI would understand what he had done. He said he would answer their questions only if a radiological expert was present. Because of this, the FBI worked with Dave Minar from the Department of Public Health. David explained his experiments, the results, the elements he used, and his goals in detail to Dave Minar and the authorities. He had no intention of harming anyone, but as a result of the experiments, the radiation level had gone out of control. He also told them that he carried out the experiments in a shed in his mother's backyard, and that the radiation level there was very high. The FBI, together with radiology experts, went to David's laboratory to investigate. What they saw shocked them. Even before entering the shed, radiation levels were already at a dangerous level. The FBI secured the area, and a radioactive cleanup process began. The cleanup of David's laboratory lasted 3 days. At the end of these 3 days, a total of 39 barrels of radioactive waste were removed. These wastes were taken to the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah to be safely stored without harming the environment. While this cleanup was happening, David Hahn's court process also began. However, the authorities faced an unusual problem. What David had done was not clearly defined as a crime under the laws of that time. Also, David did not want to hurt anyone. Possessing nuclear material was, of course, a serious issue, but David was only 17 years old, a curious and overly ambitious teenager. The judge described David as an extremely intelligent but unguided young man who had crossed dangerous boundaries without control. David did not receive a prison sentence. However, from that point on, he was under supervision. Authorities visited him regularly, and he also met with a psychological counselor at regular intervals. In the media, the situation was very different, and it changed David's life forever. Newspapers and television channels introduced him as the boy who built a nuclear reactor in his backyard. People now knew David as the radioactive boy or the nuclear scout. David had achieved many things with very limited resources, but no one cared about that. People saw him as a threat. His dream of going to university, his academic plans, and his goal of becoming a scientist were all overshadowed by this negative image. Later on, David's mother took her own life due to depression and hopelessness. David, who was already not very social as a child, withdrew even more into his own world. In the following years, David joined the United States Army. He wanted to put his life in order and move away from his past. Although this process brought some structure to his life, it did not fill his inner emptiness. After leaving the Army, David once again began conducting radioactive and chemical experiments on his own, using the technical knowledge he had gained in the military. Later, he was caught stealing smoke detectors and was sentenced to 90 days in prison. After his short prison sentence, David returned to his experiments. His relationship with the chemicals he produced became more personal and inward-focused. He exposed his own body to these chemicals in different ways and observed the side effects. This was almost like a punishment he gave himself as his mental health worsened. With his already damaged psychology and by experimenting on himself, David did not live a long life. In 2016, he passed away at the age of 39. He left behind neither an academic career nor an official contribution to the scientific world. A child so intelligent and passionate about science disappeared like a self-consuming reaction, simply because he was never guided in the right direction. Perhaps if he had received proper guidance, he would have contributed to science, just as his dream reactor would have provided energy. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.
The Dark Vault. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more awesome content.